So I thought I'd do a video on how I've been getting on with my tilt rotator, Engcon EC02, and I've had it for 18 months now, I guess. It's, well over a year, and I thought I'd update people because they are still fairly new to the market, and it's something that a lot of people were considering or interested in. So here's mine. Before I go through the things about how I found this tilt rotator, I thought I'd talk you through briefly the reason I went with what I went with, and my thinking behind that, because the problem with people ask a lot about how much it costs, which I'm quite happy to tell you. I think I paid just over 14 grand. I'll find the email somewhere and tell you exactly. I've got no shame in saying what it actually cost, but there's so many variables within that. So I bought the grab, which was another 2 and a bit grand, I guess. Just as that alone. Also with the EC02 package, which the DC02 package, which is again, I think it nearly doubles the cost, to be honest, to have that electronic control system all proportionally. If you had 4 pipes to the end of the dipper, you could do a much cheaper solution, but you may not be able to have as many features. So it really depends on what you really want. You need to get it priced up on your machine, because they all do vary significantly between what you want and what your applications are. So it's not that straightforward. So when we talk about DC2 and all of these things, there's a lot to learn about these tilt rotators, and I am by far the expert. But when I was doing my research, essentially you can have the full control system, which each manufacturer does their own slightly different one. And that is that you get proportional rollers, some are behind, there's buttons on the joystick, essentially proportionally controlled off of one auxiliary line to the end of the dipper, which is how it works. There are several other ways you can do it. You can do it with a simple, what they call like the simple system, which is like the button, and then you use your pedal on the floor. So you'd press a button up here, and then that would be, let's say, tilt left, and you could then proportionally control it with the pedal. It sounds really alien, but if you've tried a system at one of the dig days, it actually does kind of make sense. They tend to have tilt and rotate, obviously, on one lever, or different levers like they do in the real thing. So that actually was a system that I was really considering going for. It was around the £6,000 mark due, and it would give me the option to tilt and rotate. I wouldn't have been able to use a grab because I wouldn't have had another line down the dipper to run that, and I wouldn't have been able to have a hydraulic quick hitch. So they were a couple of things that swayed me towards going for full DC2. And also it is a bit onerous having your foot on that pedal all day. You're kind of hovering above it all day, if you know what I mean. You constantly want to swivel the bucket and whatever. So in the end I went for the full fat system, and I'm very pleased I did. However, it did add significant cost to the build. So £6 grand would have been the basic system with like 3 buckets, and I ended up at like 14 grand with a grab and a couple of extra buckets and various other little bits and bobs. So it does add up. It's now absolutely started chucking it down. Essentially there's a lot of systems. You can also do the 4 pipe system, which is another way of achieving tilt and rotate at the end. 4 or 6 pipes, as it's known, is the other one, which is where you obviously have 2 pipes going down to your quick hitch, so they can use that then as a third, like, auxiliary kind of thing, and obviously run the quick hitch and stuff off that. And the 4 pipe is obviously flow and return to tilt and rotate. So you can essentially get, using the machine's existing rollers, if it has them spec'd, maybe a kind of compromise on cost versus sort of utilising the machine's original function. My A026 didn't have that. I could have upgraded the machine and put more pipes on it and rollers, but the cost of that again was significant. So it was another factor in helping me go towards the DC2 system, because I could basically have what I wanted. Disadvantage of this, of course, it doesn't work outside. They haven't found a lever yet that's waterproof, so you can't have it on a canopy machine, which you could obviously if it was factory fitted with its own rollers. They would be IP whatever 65 or whatever it needs to be rated. So you would gain an advantage there that I couldn't have with this particular setup. So you can see how there's a myriad of kind of all sorts of options with these tilt rotators, and I really would advise finding someone who's got a similar machine to what you have, and asking them how they found it, what do they like, what do they don't like. There's a few brand loyalists out there. I think there is with everything these days, really, pretty much, you know, fanboys of whatever. I think they're all very, very good. I didn't consider steel wrist because they did the smallest one they do is S40, which is the size of the hitch and the pins and everything. The problem is that it builds your tilt rotator up to be built for a bigger machine, and I was told by a few people, and they're very right, that you're better off having the smaller tilt rotator on the bigger machine than you are trying to put the bigger tilt rotator on a smaller machine, because the weight and stuff obviously, you know, multiplies quite quickly, and the buckets are that much bigger, and you're better off being the boss of the tilt rotator. The machine bosses it rather than it then becoming like the thing. And some people have fitted steel wrists for 28026s and say they get on just fine, and I'm sure it would have been okay, but I'm very happy with the EC02. I mean, you doesn't even feel it. I went with Engcon, not really for, you know, colour reason or anything like that. I mean, it does match the colour of the machine quite nicely, which is obviously very important for the gram. But essentially because they were actually very competitive on the package that I wanted. You know, I did really consider Rototilt, did a lot of research into them. I like Rototilts because you can run a breaker on them because they're oil lubricated rather than grease, and that they actually warranty them for a breaker. So I could have gone direct mount. But even at direct mount versus the extra quick hitch that I have on here, the top hitch that is, it was still more expensive, and the top hitch added just over £1,000 to this particular package. So again, you know, there's another 1,000. So I've got the grab for 2.5. You know, this another 1,000 on the hitch. You can see how you can add up very quickly, and so you could ask the same, you know, the same question to different machine drivers with the same machine, and effectively what looks like the same setup, and they could end up with varying prices. Probably, you know, £4,000 or £5,000 different in terms of where they are. So the price isn't everything, really. It's about what you want from it, and I would recommend saving up a bit more if you think, right, I really do want that, but I can't quite afford it at this stage. You know, it really is. If you're, you know, confident that's what you're after, save the money. Don't buy the wrong thing, because once you've got the wrong thing, it's very difficult to go and adapt and change it, because, you know, they're kind of set up. I couldn't run this tilt rotator, wouldn't run on the basic system. It has to have the full system, and, you know, so and he couldn't have upgraded it that easily. It would have cost more than it would to just buy a brand new one. The other thing is the buckets. I went completely new buckets, which obviously cost a bit as well and adds into that package, and I'm really glad I did, because the old pin hitch system was brilliant on the 803 system, as it was, you know, the 803 pin sizes for the JCB that I've got. Attachments were pretty plentiful, relatively cheap, easy to get hold of. There's plenty around. They've been around for a long time. But the Scandinavian hitch system is so much smaller, and when you're worried about build height on these things, it does all add up, and they're so much neater. I mean, if I was to buy another machine again, even without a tilt rotator on it, I actually would get Scandinavian type hitch, you know, the S-type hitch, because it's just so much. It's almost virtually direct mount. They're that, you know, the build height is that narrow. So and the bucket shapes, they're just really well made. The buckets are very nice. The Engcon buckets I've got, hardox in the right places. Lightweight where, you know, they've been able to save weight where they can. So I've got like a 750 digging bucket with big cat type teeth on it. I mean, it's a weapon of a thing, and it handles it really well. You know, it's lighter even than maybe the 600 digging bucket that I had standard from JCB, which was made out of effectively cast iron. You know, it was that kind of heavy. So worth saving up for the right buckets. Don't try and save I'm going to use my old buckets, and because, you know, I sold my old buckets and hitch, and, you know, earned whatever it was, £1,000 or maybe more back, which was another thing to offset the cost of buying a tilt rotator. So there's a couple of things that you don't think of initially when you're looking to buy, that you can actually offset the cost of. So yeah, I fully recommend going with the S-type hitches, even if you've got buckets yourself, and just go full hog, because it really does make the difference to how the thing drives and handles, and you get the full benefit from all of that. So yeah, well, I'll go into how I find it.